left field, you know, with Brute Demon Hunter, with no Warlock in there, it does throw bans for a loop a little bit at the time, and I think ban strategy in Last Hero Standing is a little bit more difficult overall. You don't necessarily come into a tournament with like a preconceived ban strategy as you would do in Conquest, where it's, okay, I'm banning X, targeting Y. That's what I'm doing with my lineup. It's much more matchup matrix based in Last Hero Standing, where you kind of have to get your spreadsheet out and break it all down and look where you gain the most percentage with which ban. And again, I would have to do that in full to get as robust an opinion here as Bunnyhoppor has with his ban, but just eyeballing it, I do think it makes sense with the way the matchups would tend to break down.
And I'm loving staring at Bunnyhoppor, staring at this mulligan, because when you're on coin and you're offered Ganling and a Tiny Fin, you start to think about things.
Bunnyhoppor just staring, locking eyes with Murloc Tiny Fin, just enjoying the moment they have together.
Yeah. And I like the approach as well. It's like I 3-0'd with Priest yesterday. Let's start, carry on the plan here and just start Priest again. And he does keep it. Now the big question here, Sottle. Okay. This question's now gone out the window because of the mulligan. But I was going to say, in this instance, is there ever a world where Bunnyhoppor actually holds Tiny Fin back to coin it out on 3 with Ganling guaranteed? Bit different with Deceptor now, but still.
Yeah, I think literally both of the 2 cards that were drawn off the rest of the mulligan have changed that completely, right? Because, as you say, Deceptor changes it as well, because Deceptor guarantees you Raise Dead. Raise Dead will probably guarantee you Tiny Fin, and then you can just do all that stuff with Gandling on turn 3 with the coin anyway.
Right.
And obviously the Elucia just throws everything out of the window. And I realise as soon as I say that actually I should not be disappointed that Bunny has found the Elucia yet again, because actually what this means is that Bunnyhoppor is continuing doing the noble damned eye-like job of proving how broken a card is in the highest level of competitive play. So I'm here for it. Let's go, Bunnyhoppor.
It's going to hold.
Makes no sense if anyone didn't watch the end of the broadcast yesterday. Who's damned eye? What are you talking about?
Care to make a wager, friend?
Tell the story again. No, don't.
No, we're good.
Yeah. Felkeine, I think, doing a good job though in approaching this in the best way possible, right? You know you can get sort of overran early on with Priest. This rogue, although does have options on dealing with board, you don't really want to have to fight back the board, sort of try and take the board back after a Priest has just splurged loads of minions there. So I do like this, just going as board heavy as possible, especially seeing that Bunnyhoppor's just passed turn 1, which is not something you see often against Priest.
Yeah, and that was going to be my question, which, in the great words of Basement Jacks, where's your head at if you're Felkeine right now? Because your opponent 2-kept and then did not play a minion on turn 1 or turn 2. You feel like you probably know what's going on, right? Is that they've either kept a Lucia and hit a bad hand, or they've kept a Gandling combo and they're going to be coining it out next turn. So I think that does have to start influencing your plays already.
Yeah, and I think that read is very fair. It's important that as casters, we always try and think, as the player's position and not the fact we could see both hands. But I think that read is very, very fair indeed, because it's so uncommon for a Priest on coin to not have played minions yet that you do have to ask those questions. And you're right, those are the general answers you look at. Here, though, different options. Can't just go for Tour Guide, get another ping. Maybe... okay. Could go for just the Gandling, but I'm even looking at something weird like Tour Guide, ping, and then just maybe even play the Twilight Deceptor out. Is that crazy?
Yeah, the problem is spending the mana to get the Raise Dead in your hand, right? Because if you already had the Raise Dead in your hand, you could even spend mana on ping this turn, pay 2 for it, play the Tour Guide after the fact, and play the Murloc Tiny Fin, with the intention of having those die next turn, and then going Gandling, Raise Dead, Coin, Tour Guide, Murloc Tiny Fin. But you can't do that because you need to get the Raise Dead in your hand, which is what this diversion is about, ignoring the board, getting the Raise Dead in the hand. Now, Bunny intends to go Gandling, Murloc Tiny Fin. The Murloc Tiny Fin dies before it's transformed into a 4/4, so then he can go Raise Dead, hopefully hit exactly Tour Guide and the Tiny Fin off the Raise Dead and get an enormous board of 4/4s.
And even if he whiffs on that, he gets the second Deceptor, which will draw him another Raise Dead a little bit later on as well. So even the worst case scenario is pretty good. So I like I like this play a lot. All the time, Neophyte's not super impactful against Priest, but we can see now the lack of coin being available for Bunnyhoppor is actually going to limit this turn's potential quite a lot.
It is, yes. It's still a very good Hearthstone turn, even with just Gandling and one Murloc Tinyfin here, but it certainly does limit the big options for sure.
Well, the frustration as well is, if he plays Gandling and a Tinyfin, and the 4/4 dies, his Raised Dead is potentially a lot worse, right?
It's true. I think everything else you can possibly do this turn is just too low impact to really be worrying about that too much.
Agreed.
You know, what's that horrible cliche thing, like aim for the moon, because even if you miss, you land among the stars? Some tripe like that, but that's kind of what's happened here from Bunnyhoppor, right?
Gotta say something, but I might get into trouble, so I won't.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I guess he just has to commit, right? And at worst case, the majority of the board gets cleaned up and everyone's even again, but Bunnyhoppor has potentially very strong Raised Dead.
Class dismissed.
Yes. After great deliberation, Bunnyhoppor arrives at the same conclusion. Or rather, more accurately, he probably arrived at the same conclusion immediately at the start of the turn as I did, but being the consummate professional that he is, spent maximum time trying to work out if he could find anything better.
These next turns are still going to be tricky for Bunnyhoppor because he has a lot of mana to spend and not a lot of time to do so. But Felkeine, on the other hand, has to decide whether he wants to just be okay with a Fireball. Yeah, this looks okay, right? Fireball Orc Merchant turn?
Problem is, you know about the Raised Dead, right? So it's still pretty awkward looking. 1/4/4 going into the pool, but also Gandling going into the pool. There's Tour Guides and Tiny Fins in there that can be played out in the same turn. Like, what are the chances this board just comes back if you do that?
Yeah, it's rough, but I feel like you end in a similar situation even if you don't do that, because then you leave Gandling on board and Bunnyhopper's sitting on a Raised Dead anyway and 4 more cards, which are generally going to be minions, right?
Yes. That is very fair. I think Felkeine's just going to fight for tempo here, which is a wise thing to be doing. Shadow Step outs were pretty good there. Prep even could have got something done potentially based on sequence of draws, but yeah, he's able to clear it up. Bunny's going to need to hit the juice here with the Raised Dead. Does hit the Gandling and the Tour Guide. Can coin out an additional Tour Guide here as well and gets the 0 mana ping. You see Felkeine's reaction to that. It's brutal.
Wait till he sees the second one. That second ping just as good as the first, honestly, for free next turn.
Yep.
Especially with the amount of mana Bunnyhoppor has in his hand to spend it out, getting that free ping. Ooh.
And now you've got to start worrying if you're Felkeine, because, I mean, you probably can't is the issue, because even though you're looking over at Bunny's hand, you're seeing 4 cards, you're probably not that scared of Elucia, right? Because they still have 4 cards in their hand, so it doesn't feel like it's going to be a dump your hand into Elucia anytime soon. The thing is for Bunny is that he doesn't need to do that because the rest of his hand is so trash to give to the opponent that he can pretty much just Elucia at any point.
And I remember saying this a ton of time in testing, I think last week, where I was like, yeah, give them a reader, because if they play it, they give you 3 cards and then they get to keep it afterwards. Like, I'll take that trade. You can have a 1/3 if I get 3 card draws. Like, sounds great to me.
Yeah, I don't think Voracious Reader would have been nerfed if it was a 2 mana 1/3 that drew 3 cards somehow. Combustion's pretty huge.
Yeah. I think you'd be looking for a brain freeze, like a brain freeze or a flurry maybe from this one thief. Cone of Cold's kind of close. Got to be Cone, right? And he just cones this turn.
Yeah, this is the awkward part, right? Sorry, I was a little bit silent because I was considering this, is what do you do with the combustion if you use the Cone of Cold? And I think you saw Felkeine even considering slightly ridiculous things of deliberately only freezing 2 minions to try and leave up the 4/1, which is the minion that you want to leverage with the combustion, right? But both things just didn't work out particularly well that turn overall. This did give a little bit of information over to Bunny, though, because he saw a spell get pointed at one of his minions, which did not then get used.
Tricky as well, because on the surface, the merchant into Elucia looks pretty good. Just to empty the hand, basically. Still gets to ping, of course, but because he's against this type of rogue, he might want the mana free, right? To maybe dump something from Felkeine's hand.
Yeah, just didn't really get anything there.
Yep.
He chose to not leave the mana open. I was kind of with you, but obviously we can see the hand, which makes the decision infinitely easier. And even just jamming out a fireball from the hand there would have been pretty disgusting from Bunny's perspective, but ends up not being able to play anything. Now he's in a little bit of danger because he knows about Fireball Garrot on the other side, right? And if that goes back to the hand from Felkeine, might just find himself in a little spot of bother.
Yeah,
I think you see the confusion on Felkeine's face here, right? So, really? That goes face. You've seen my hand, and that still goes face. Very interesting.
Wait, did he need to trade?
Well, if he didn't trade, he'd be at 8, and he'd be handing Fireball, Garrot, and 8 mana back to his opponent.
Wouldn't you have just set up lethal, though?
He has 15 on board, and he would have pushed 4 more. Sorry, he has 19 on board, and he would have pushed 4 more. But he loses a 4-1 guaranteed, so he only has 15
hero
on
power.
board. He does have hero power. That's true. No, that's true.
Because he knows there's no damage coming from Felkeine apart from whatever minions he leaves and a dagger, I guess. But the dagger, if trades, then that does the swing anyway, right? So I don't know whether he should have just pushed all face there.
But it was what traded? It was the Gandling that traded in the end, right? Or was
No, it was a 4. Yeah, because it was all of them were 4/4s apart from the 4/1, right? So that 4/4 traded in.
Ooh!
Wait a minute.
That's lethal.
Yep. Right now, Bunny. Focus. 5, 10, 15, 19, 21, 22.
What?
I'm going to ask you again, Sol, because this is now stressing me out. I did count that right, didn't I?
5, 10, 15, 19, 22. Yes.
Okay. Oh, what are people doing to me today?
Oh, no, sorry, the Gandling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm stressed.
Yeah. The last one got to us, Raven. The last one got to us.
Wait,
that's
could
our
he
fault.
have...
So that's what he would have spent all turn counting, right? Trade the Gandling, and then you have 18 goes face by not playing the Gandling, because there's no other way of doing it or getting it for a ping. That's fine. That's 1-1. That's casted 1,
it's a roller
players
coaster.
1. We've both thrown horribly. Fine, okay.
Now, if he'd pushed the 4 damage, Sol... earlier.
Yeah, that's the one I'm still not quite so sure about. I'd have to go back and look at that exact turn as to what the breakpoints were, but it certainly sounds like what you were saying made sense.
When he knows there's a Cone of Cold in hand, so he knows these minions will almost certainly skip a turn next turn. Does have that Voracious Reader to help him try and refill, but honestly, without Elucia, I think both players are going to be sweating a little bit now.
Yep. You can just Garrot face this turn, dagger up to push the extra 1 with the dagger, and then Cone of Cold the 3 minions. That looks reasonable as a baseline. Means then if you draw any minion you can give spell damage to on the following turn, your opponent will be at 8 going into the turn, so you will have dagger for 1 plus fireball for 7. And obviously any Garrot draw also gets there at that point.
Felkeine, praying to the French gods.
There is no
Pretty dead there from Bunnyhoppor. Any minion, any bleed?
Efficient.
You got it.
Minion. Yep. Octobot will do it. Spell damage +1, Fireball for 7, Dagger for 1. That makes 8. And the Reign of Terror for Bunnyhoppor's Alucia does come to an end. Very, very interesting game in the mid-game there. It has to be said, a very interesting game created by that Alucia dynamic as well, because Bunny had all the options, right? Whether to try and leave more mana open to dump more stuff from his opponent's hand, but that would involve giving a Cult Neophyte over to the opponent, which he then chose to play himself for more pressure. Left himself only 1 mana in the end to be able to play with his opponent's hand, which normally you can do something pretty good with a Rogue's hand with 1 additional mana. You know, give one of your minions Divine Shield, for example, can come up. But it's very interesting knowing what he knew, which was 2 of the cards in hand were random mage spells.
Right.
One of them was pointed at his minions on the previous turn. I don't know whether his read specifically was that card that was pointed at his minion was Brain Freeze, and that's why he did it the way he did. And then ended up missing on that with it not really being able to play anything. But I think the Alucia still had a big impact in the game. It's just kind of the...
not the one we're used to.
Yeah, not the one we're used to, and kind of the spot that Bunny got himself in, perhaps through fault of his own, perhaps not, that he ended up with a pretty underwhelming Alucia turn, where honestly his opponent was still able to race him back more effectively than he was.
Yeah, it's really tricky as well, because there are so many, I guess, low-impact spells that could be aimed at minions, right? Even like First Flame and stuff, yes, it would have killed the 1-2 and so on. It's tough because is a selection of 2 random mage spells better than having a Neophyte on board? And that's in itself is a very tough question. Looking on, of course, as we move on there, Felkeine is going to be on this the Rogue once again. I nearly said Priest because I've just got Priest on the brain for some reason. But Bunnyhoppor going to be switching over to this Handlock, and again, a little bit more of a standard list, not running the Nulls, but running that slightly heavier draw focus package with the Rune Mithril Rod and those Pantheras.
Yeah, pretty, I suppose, middle of the pack list, right? Where you're still playing the additional card draw with the Pantheras, but you're also getting the Giants in there as well. It's kind of the all-rounder version of the deck right now. I think it's what people are kind of referring to as the standard build at this point, when most people have agreed that Rod should come into the deck as well. But it's not a fortuitous counter queue to be going into Garrote Rogue, let's say. This is not the first deck I would want to be queuing up to use as my Q snipe going into a Rogue on the other side. So I think that opening loss for Bunny on the Shadow Priest has actually put him in a pretty rough spot in this series overall, if this is where he now has to go with the counter queue.
Yeah, whenever you see a player move into game 2 and you wince a little bit for that player, you know something's gone wrong. And a pretty solid opening for Felkeine as well so far, just having access to that field contact nice and early. I feel like it's the only thing we've spoken about for the past 2 days with Rogue is, have they got field contact yet? So pretty big for him there, getting that and having some way at least to just carry over the next couple of turns. It looks like one of the players might be having some connection issues.
Connection! Is that an unknowing Chris Jericho impression, Raven?
Probably. Well, you tell me, Sol, right? You tell me.
Yeah, he calls himself the champion. Everything has that inflection on the end of all of his words. He used to do it deliberately to be annoying, and then everyone loved it, so he just kept doing it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Bunnyhoppor just going to go with the standard hero power, getting a Tour Guide down. Doesn't really do too much. If this was a slightly more aggressive matchup, might have seen that Tour Guide get dropped, but Pull of it for now. Can now tap Tour Guide. Continue with his day. I don't think Bunnyhoppor needs to respect this Neophyte too much.
Tap Tour Guide, continue with his day. So he taps, he plays the Tour Guide, he just gets up and starts dusting his skirting boards or something. Why was that the first household chore that I could think of?
I've got many questions.
Skirting boards.
Is it the only one you do? Is that why?
No, it's because I actually need to do it. I looked up at, you know, like I'm not sure if they're skirting boards when they're on the ceiling, but like the joints.
Oh, like the rails things?
Yeah, like the ceiling and the wall. I looked up and there was like cobwebs in a spot that I hadn't seen before. I was like, oh, I must dust those tonight. And that's why it was on my mind.
I think I'm making this up, or if this is some kind of urban myth, but were they used to like put pictures on at one point? Is that where?
Really? I've never heard that.
You know when you have like them stick out a little bit from the wall? I think they used to put pictures on at some point in time. I could just be making it up. Who knows?
What are we talking about?
So we're now role-playing the Americas Grandmasters here.
Yeah, very fair.
At the moment, though, Felkeine's managed to get hold of a very powerful hand here. The Octobot, the field contact, and a ton of things to do if Bunnyhoppor plays a minion.
It's a hand that is progressing very slowly for the bunny as well. There is a backfire available that he might want to just dump here just to start turboing through to pick up some threats. Does find second backfire. Okay, there is the Flesh Giant finally, so he can start getting that down to a relatively playable level. But Felkeine does have checks for it in hand with those prize plunderers, and this is a pretty premium discount hand, it's got to be said. But he needs some help. He doesn't necessarily want to be using Ethereal Org Merchant. It's not necessarily illegal to do so either, but he will probably be looking for a different method to procto his Octo here.
Okay, picking up Kazakus, not terrible. Again, not really the main focus in terms of progressing the overall game plan, but a good little way to
That's
tie by
not
the turn.
poison shoot. I will eat my own socks, Raven.
I gotta check on what that golem is.
Please,
really
it's important.
We're having a very interesting break.
The stakes have never been higher.
Now, purely because of that Kazakus, it's a bit more of a tough decision that if Bunnyhoppor just wants to play a giant into this alone.
Yes.
If it is poison deal damage, then that will be a very upsetting turn for Bunnyhoppor.
It will, and there's currently no Raise Dead in hand even to offset that, right? Where you could just do the same thing again next turn. So it could be a potentially pretty big problem if he gives such a huge tempo swing over to the opponent. Not to mention that that could all just be done in a discounted field contact turn as well on top of all of that, right?
Well, there's Raise Dead.
Okay, there's Raise Dead.
You could still bail a little bit and just go Drain Soul and Cult Neophyte this turn.
Mm-hmm.
Hate it.
Almost out of time.
I guess the Raise Dead leans him towards the giant. Makes sense.
Is no problem that the 1/1's on board. Felkeine has the dagger to clear that up nice and easy. He also has all the tools in the world available to him this turn. This is a dreamy looking hand. The only small issue he's going to have is that not too many of these initial cards can really be used on the initial field contact cycle. He'll want to save most of them for the second field contact, the one that kills his opponent. But outside of that, this is a glorious looking hand.
Yeah, Felkeine's about to bring the pain right about now because his whole hand now costs more or less nothing. He can cycle a ton of cards next turn as well.
Slightly worried, Raven. This giant's still alive.
It's fine, he can't move. This is actually better than it being dead because Bunnyhoppor can't Raise Dead now.
Yeah, no, I'm just slightly concerned about what the text on the golem is based on that it didn't die this. You know what I'm saying? See what I'm getting at?
Did you specify the socks you're wearing now?
I just said my socks.
Oh, always give yourself an out.
I'm pretty sure it's poison deal down. I
Next
don't
thing
know
you're
what
going to
else
tell
you
me
would've
is,
taken there.
oh yeah, I've got some gingerbread socks in the oven, conveniently.
I could just whip up a batch of gingerbread socks. Yeah,
there you
seems
go.
reasonable.
Yep, we're going to go Rod Backfire. Probably not this turn, right? It's probably going to be the Backfire next turn, if anything, so he gets the Rod activation.
Okay, I have some good news for everyone named Soto, is that I've just got back into the Spectator and can confirm it is poison deal 3 damage.
Damn it.
Yeah.
I have to get you commit to even more silly things in the future. Stay tuned, Hearthstone Grandmasters.
That's the hook we've been missing all along.
Bunnyhoppor, quite a slow turn, to be honest here. Not really putting too much pressure on board and seeing a huge hand reduction from Felkeine and then not responding with a lot of pressure must feel pretty bad for him right now.
Agreed. And Felkeine, I think, playing very calmly here, very sensibly here, in that he's not really being forced to do anything. So he's not doing anything. You know, that is a luxury that you do have with this deck sometimes. Is I think some of the stickiest situations we've seen people go into is when they've gone, oh, I have lethal this turn. I, the big brain Hearthstone player, will achieve lethal this turn and show everyone how good I am. And then they throw and miss lethal, right? When in reality, they could have just done nothing and just waited one more turn, two more turns, right? And then just had the guaranteed lethal a few turns later. So obviously we're not in a lethal setup situation right now for Felkeine, because he's still on first field contact. But the longer and longer he can get away with doing nothing, like the more beneficial that is for his deck.
That's why I really like the snap freeze. Yeah, he picked it as well. This makes perfect sense, right? Well, okay, he doesn't seem too happy about something, but I think snap freeze in this Giant's really powerful. Like you said, it's just, it moves the game on a turn. Great. Again, no raised dead shenanigans for the Giant. Bunnyhoppor one tap away from having this Scavenger and Bristleback active.
Yeah, the Scavenger will cost 0 as well once the tap comes through because of a, I believe, not working as intended interaction. But here we are. The game is the referee. We must abide by it.
Yeah, game's just mimicking football, right? The ref decides what the rules are during the game.
The ref decides when you cost 0.
And I think the Scavenger... Oh, come on.
I was just going to say, I think the fear for Felkeine with the way that he's played this is this kind of awkward board state coming down, right? Because he has played fast and loose with the Giant here. And now, okay, that's the draw that was going to be the end of my sentence, is that he's got greedy with his poison deal damage. And that's allowed all these small minions to get on the board, which, you know, creates additional targets that the poison deal damage might not hit. However, he's also given himself additional time to find Shadow Step, which is something that can, of course, do massive, massive work with that lesser golem now.
Yeah, and I was just going to say the Scavenger's actually just more of a big deal than the Bristleback here, right? Because the heal doesn't often make that big a difference in the outcome, so... Bunnyhoppor being able to get down both, of course, fantastic. But we are hitting that point where Felkeine is going to do big things, or at least wants to do big things. Can still go for Brain Freeze again and just kill off the Scavenger with the
I think it's going to have to
all the other way around, like whatever.
Plunders and steps, right? Yeah. Looks decent, because he can now plunder, step, plunder the 6/6, and then just trade the 1/2 into the 8.
Oh, sure.
Clear up. Seems fine. Yikes, he just drew spell on a neophyted field contact turn. That's savage. Nowhere near as good a turn as Felkeine would have been hoping for. So I guess the end of my sentence wasn't Shadow Step. The end of my sentence should have been Cult Neophyte, right? If we really want to evaluate the risk-reward tree on the way Felkeine played that, his greed allowed for this wide board to appear, so his poison deal damage might and did hit a weaker target than it could have ended up doing. But he gave himself the out of hitting Shadow Step, but then there's also Cult Neophytes that can come into play, which makes Shadow Steps actually surprisingly inefficient on a field contact turn. So pros and cons for sure. But it does seem like Felkeine is not as ahead as he should be in this situation.
To be fair, though, I wouldn't say he's massively behind either, right? Like, this is still a board that Bunnyhoppor has to deal with. He's clearly not going for a Soul Rend this turn, going to try and pick apart the board with the removal he's got, which is going to be quite strong because of Tamsin.
Bam! 1 mana. 1 mana. 1 mana. He'll have to decide here whether he wants to keep going, or he can even choose to cheat a Raised Dead here for an additional copy of Raised Dead, which is a super clutch interaction. He's going to do that. You're probably going to do it before you play your last touch to be able to pick up that healing, but in the end, just fully cycles all the way through the Tamsin Cult Neophyte interaction.
Okay, so Felkeine with the Shroud and Secret Passage, so important to see what's still left in the deck to try and dig for. Especially if you could get maybe a Field Contact Shadow Step or something along those lines. And with the Rogue combo, Sol, is 2 spell damage enough against a 30 health deck?
So +2 spell damage is 4 damage per, and you're dealing 8, so that's the 32. So generally against any deck that doesn't gain armor or play Armor Vendor or some other way to get above 30, +2 spell damage is fine. It's just kind of the generic version that you are looking for. Why, when I was talking about before, when you play Armor Vendor in the Warlock, you can sometimes get above that 32 breakpoint and push them onto the next one, which, you know, requires them to be a little greedier. However, when you're playing Armor Vendor in your deck, you're not playing enough threats to actually make them use Shadow.
True.
So it's kind of catch-22, but I like this play. Maximum damage off the board. Just rip the Secret Passage just to dump as many cards as you can. Preparation, you have to consider whether or not you actually need that for your field contact turn or not. Foxy Fraud, same deal, because Foxy Fraud is a kind of 2-in-1 effect, right, on the field contact turn, if you can get that through. So in the end, just chooses to dump the Secret Passage as the solo card that he gets rid of there. You can see with 1 remaining Shadow Step as well, he does even have additional damage that he can throw out here, but with 1 mana Octobot in hand, 0 mana Orc Merchants, he should be nicely set up for the following turn here.
Yeah, even through this Neophyte, so is there any world in which Bunnyhoppor's looking for a raise dead into more Neophytes, say?
Absolutely, I think that's the first thing you're looking for this turn. Unless you choose to say that you aren't going to get comboed this turn and your better win condition is to set up, say, Tamsin this turn, but I don't really think that's going to be the case.
So Tamsin, Shadow Blast, Neophyte? Tap? Words? It's just he's got so many options.
That sentence was already trailing off when it started. It was great.
Because the more I looked at one play, I'm like, but he could do these 8 other plays.
Yes, you could do all of the things this turn if you would really like to.
Could even finish on 30 health that turn if he really wanted to. Or if he really wants to, should I say? And I guess at this point, is it fair to say there's no reason not to finish the turn at 30?
I think no reason not to is the correct way to look at it, yes, because, as I said, it doesn't really change your breakpoint. The breakpoints are 24 and 32. You know what resources your opponent has left. You know what breakpoint is achievable. But just in case it ends up being like the 24 breakpoint plus an Ignite from a 1 Thief or something, right? Then that's suddenly the 27, 28 damage that you've played around by healing back up to 30. So I think no reason not to, as opposed to no reason to, is the correct way of looking at it.
You're paying for my discretion.
So let's see. Can he still do it? There is a prep remaining, which is a very big deal, and nothing else in his hand costs a great deal of mana. He did draw the Garrote as well, which is huge, because that allowed him to discount it immediately right off the rip with the Octobot. He now has to spend 6 mana on Garrotes, 2 mana on Field Contact. But as mentioned, there is the prep in the deck remaining, I believe.
The prep won't do anything though, right?
Oh no, because it's double increased, right? Yeah. Sorry, I'm used to, on a Neophyte turn, prep still being 1 mana gain 2 mana. But yeah, the prep doesn't actually achieve anything at all here.
Choose soon.
It's quiet.
And because Lethal was set up on the other side, I think Felkeine quite rightly understanding just needs to go for it here.
That's a whiff.
Yeah, we can see the result already. Spoilers!
Spoiler alert.
Felkeine looks sad and has conceded, and the bleeds did not come out all in a row there for Bunnyhoppor. That was a hard way to go about it. And I think, again, massive examination will have to go into that mid-game from Felkeine, right? Because I think that's the big kicker. He waited and waited, which I was agreeing with at the time, so I'm not going to fault him for it. But I think what becomes apparent is that sometimes you're saying, okay, well, if I wait, I have 1 extra mana next turn. I'm 1 card deeper in my deck next turn. I can play 1 extra card with Field Contact. I'm 1 card deeper to Shadow Step or Foxy Fraud or whatever it is that's the absolute nuts draw to allow me to do whatever I want to do. You're also 1 turn closer to getting Neophyted, which then on average probably makes your Field Contact turn worse and not better, which I think has ended up what happened here, because both Field Contact turns eventually for Felkeine ended up just being brutally disrupted by neophytes on the other side, which is, I guess, a really big part of the matchup that you do have to consider. But whether or not Felkeine had an effective way to play around that by going earlier, by waiting, I think on the last turn, obviously lethal was represented, so he just had to go and hope that he got there in that case. But again, another reason why this deck is getting such a reputation of as being so tricky to pilot, and how, you know, pilot error and pilot decisions can really play such a big part in the deck overall.
Right, yeah, and we are going to be moving on to a slightly different type of deck in the form of the Brute Demon Hunter. A lot about playing those Brutes down nice and early. Lion's Frenzy can push a ton of damage with the right situation, but in general the question is just going to be, can Bunnyhoppor respond to a Brute turn or not? Because a lot of the time decks just either can or they can't, and that spells the end of the game if the Demon Hunter gets enough Brutes out early enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a build that has also evolved a little bit with now double Royal Librarian in, which I don't hate as much as single Royal Librarian that we were seeing before, because it's interesting, right? Like, Kane has been cut because it's a difficult card to make cost very little at the end of a Kurtrus turn. I think that's one of the big reasons why players don't like it. You can try and glide it back into your deck, but even paying the mana for a glide sometimes seems too expensive when you're trying to do the Lion's Frenzy OTK after Kurtrus. Whereas Royal Librarian, obviously you can just keep trading back into your deck until it costs 0 on a Kurtrus turn, and then play it when you draw it and it ends up costing 0 to silence away a taunt. So it's a lot more mana efficient in being able to do that. Whether you need to do it once or twice, it still costs 0 if you're able to cycle it effectively. The problem I had before is that people were just playing one Royal Librarian, and then you're just like saying, okay, I concede to Feral Spirit. You know, like, it just did not make any sense to me. So in at least this way, I think this deck makes a lot more sense now with the double Royal Librarian, but obviously the pitfalls of Brute Demon Hunter still remain, and we have talked extensively, all casters, basically everyone in the entire community has talked extensively about this deck. I think it's been one of the most hotly debated decks of this metagame.
And Bunnyhoppor has a bit of a mixed bag of an opening to go along as well, right? He has Rune Mithril Rod, which is good, but other than that, everything just looks a little bit too slow, and also a huge lack of removal as well. Like, what is Bunnyhoppor even looking at anything specific for removal in case of a Brute turn? Like, what are the best even options he could have?
Not really. Like, the answers to Brutes tend to be too expensive overall. Like, Tamsin Solren, for example, can basically deal with any number and any size of Brutes, but that's 7 mana, so that's obviously very difficult to get down all in one turn with the speed that Brutes can come down. Outside of that, it's Shadow Blast is normally the key to unlocking it, and then it's Shadow Blast plus Coil or Shadow Blast plus Touch. But again, things can happen too quickly for that to be particularly effective.
Speaking of which,
Glide's not the one though. Spectral Sight is the one. That is very much the one. That's what you wanted. Now, Spectral Sight is going. Will this complete another quest?
I think it does, right?
So there's a chance he can get Illidari Studies or another philosophy discounted.
Oh, it's 4.
Okay. It's 4. Okay, 4 or 5. It's fine. Because, yeah, if that had completed another quest step, then he hits Illidari Studies. Even if the Illidari Studies doesn't hit philosophy, he can still play it for 0 because it gets discounted, and then the philosophy that he already had will cost 0 as his next outcast spell that he's playing. So there was a way to engineer a third Brute there if the quest was going to complete again. But he'll just have to roll, I suppose, with 2 7/8s.
Yeah, Bunnyhoppor going for the tap. I'm a little bit surprised. I thought we could look at double Neophyte that turn. 1, it reduces what Felkeine can even do, but also 2 Neophytes mean 2 trades into the 7/8s, which put them to 5, which then the Soul Rend the turn after can clean them up.
Yes, very fair. I think next turn now, by tapping, he's digging his way through his deck for, you know, additional tools, Shadow Blasts, Drain Souls, etc. Tour Guide is a decent pickup because it allows him to gain a bunch of mana next turn for 1 mana instead of 2, because he'll get a natural draw plus the tap from the Tour Guide. So I don't know whether he's looking for Tamsin, for Shadow Blast, all those kind of things, and just leveraging the fact that he has the rod discounts available to try and get a big tempo swing. But I certainly would not have minded your suggestion, which is just to be ambitious and hope for the double trade. The problem that you'll run into immediately, though, is this, right?
Yeah.
One of them, at the very least, is always going to get sniped down by this trade.
And I don't think there's a draw that can really help Bunnyhoppor, right? Is it just because of the...
Tamsin now? No, still not quite.
And I was just thinking, like, because that won't quite be enough, the fact that Lion's Friend is equipped, right? The odds on Felkeine being able to draw enough cards to push an extra... Say one dies, right? To push an extra, what, 4 damage? I think is pretty high, right? With the way the deck is built.
Yeah, and as I was saying before, even with the rod discount, Tamsin Soulrend is still 1 mana away, so Tamsin Shadow Blast is the best that he has available, and even then that's only killing one of these, and going to be dealing, what, 4 damage to yourself as you kill a 7-2 with the second one?
So many possibilities.
Yeah, Soulrend's the best way to go about it.
So now 7 from the Brute. Normal draw for 1 from the weapon. Hero power goes up to 2 at a minimum. But guess what?
Yep, just glide hero
enough.
power. Yep, nothing else matters. He just needs glide into hero power and he is chilling.
Just as easy as that. A couple of early Brutes. No great answers. And honestly, not a lot of decks have great answers to a Brutes that early, apart from the odd Hysteria you see in a couple of Warlocks now and again as a kind of weird, just one-off tech. But outside of that, not going to be good enough. And Felkeine takes a pretty easy victory in response to Bunnyhoppor grabbing a win in the previous game. So a really strong game for him there. It means he's got Brute Demon Hunter again, going up against Bunnyhoppor with only his Shaman left over now. So again, although Shaman has good ways to get on board early, has pretty decent removal, if those Brutes just come out early without some kind of Bloom shenanigans and perfect removal, that's still going to be quite the task for Bunnyhoppor to clear up.
Yeah, for sure. Shaman does have a little bit of game here and there, right? But it generally comes from box openings. We pick up Devolving Missiles or Torrent, for example. Torrent, I think, being the most efficient answer that you can get, perhaps in any class, to dealing with early Brutes coming down.
I guess in a weird way, like Feral Spirits is often just good, right? Even if it just buys you time and chips away at the health. Canal Slugger can make up a big difference as well in terms of just pushing almost enough damage to kill one off, depending on stats, of course. So yeah, there are options here. It's a bit of a better go of it than he did in the Warlock matchup, at least in my opinion. But still, might be a bit of an uphill climb if Felkeine can do the thing, though, because if he doesn't get to put Brutes down early, there isn't really any removal in the deck. There's the odd, like, what's he playing here? He's got 1. Sorry, 2 Soul Shears, and that's more or less it, which 2 Soul Shears doesn't often deal with an early Shaman board if they get to pop off, so it'll be a close one. Let's move into game number 4.
Good opener for Felkeine. Any opener that has Sigil in it, you're certainly not going to turn your nose up at. There is one of those 2 Ollie Gunners, I should correct myself, saying 1 initially.
I get that reference.
Good.
Bunnyhoppor, on the other hand, what is he looking for? Does he want to commit into something along the lines of digging for Bloom, or do you think just having Serpent Shrine guaranteed on 3 is good, and therefore does he keep investment opportunity just to have something guaranteed to do on 2 because he's off coin?
It's a good question. I mean, honestly, I think I'm a little bit guilty of this myself, where I panic against Brute Demon Hunter, even with the lack of respect that I have for the deck. I look at a card like Serpent Shrine Portal and go, oh, I think it's just too slow. Like, I need to do things quicker than that. They're going to have 3 7/8s on the board by the time I play this. And they're just not, right? Like, it's just not the reality of how most games pan out. And I think in the end, just having consistent, reliable pressure, like, this is great, right? Like, Wandmaker, Serpent Shrine into Marsh Spawn, beautiful. That's enough pressure to be making Demon Hunter have to worry about their turns in most reasonable scenarios.
Yeah, and we can see, right, there's not tons of card draw available for Felkeine quite yet. So that's going to be a few turns time for now. And like you said, there's good follow-up here from Bunnyhoppor. I really like Serpent Shrine into Marsh Spawn. It looks good. I guess it's a bit of a long shot now, but the only question is whether he would ever play just a standard Marsh Spawn because he knows it's going to be a 3-4 and not susceptible or as susceptible to a second Soul Share. But after seeing the first one, I think you just slammed the Serpent Shrine, right?
Agreed, yes. The Jarunner being used while it is outcasted, I think is particularly important with this particular hand because with 2 double jumps, you are very specifically going to need various things to be outcast on that right-hand side of your hand, so you can't be hoping to hold on to outcast draws. Felkeine now has a decision, though, as to whether he wants to go hard this turn. He did get a second sigil, though, which is beautiful, because that now allows him to preserve the coin for the following turn while front-loading a Sigil of Alacrity. Discounts acrobatics and philosophy. Oh, it's a brutey hand, Raven. It's just missing the brute. There is a torrent, though. Yeah, and I think you see the reaction from Bunny. He's like, yep, that's torrent.
And also for the second card, like investment opportunity, not so bad, right? Although he does only get to pick one.
Yeah, I think honestly it'd be between guidance and torrent.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, look at the guidance. I mean, that's in your deck as well. So it's the decisions, right? Because he's...
Yeah, you see it all over his face. This decision is hard.
Yeah, I think I'd still pick Torrent, honestly. It's the one thing you don't have, right? Everything else you do kind of already have in the deck.
The old caster special. Yeah, I'm really not sure. Has the player made their decision? There it is. Okay, yeah, I agree with what the player did. That
I knew Bunnyhoppor would do this, because I am too a good Hearthstone player. It's like building... Oh!
He was bruted!
And with double philosophy.
Philosophy. Double jump to get the brute down to 0. He needs that Spirit Jailer out of his hand, though. Do not make the disastrous mistake. Even after the double jump, there will still be the 50-50, so he needs to make sure he does this right. The other card from Acrobatics was traded, not played, so this won't draw the Acrobatics buff. He does get the sequencing spot on, though, in the end. And this is going to be a triple brute kind of board.
Time grows short.
Felkeine's getting a lot of work done this turn. As long as those brutes hit the board, though, I'll be happy. Oh, don't shake your hand. I don't need a handshake right now.
Oh! He got the 4th one! Oh, the 0-mana Spectral Sight.
Oh, Felkeine nearly gave me a heart attack. He looks like he's just made the worst play in the world, and he's played 4 brutes on turn 4.
Yeah, so
Don't do this to me, mate.
I think what happened is one of the philosophy was not outcast when it could have been, so he's missing +1/+1 on 2 brutes. I think that's what happened.
Okay.
But again, obviously his hand flies around so much in that position that it's hard to keep track of. But
yeah,
I think that's what he's looking annoyed at. But I mean, it looked like he played a pretty good Hearthstone turn when you look at the board, right?
And is that Torrent not being active as well for Bunnyhoppor? Got to spend 4 mana for that bad boy.
Yep. That's always the downside, right? This is a very common curve with Shaman, is that you go spell on 3 into Marsh Spawn on 4, or you go quest on 1, coin Marsh Spawn, right? The latter's great, because if the...
Wait a minute. What does this even do?
Never mind. Forget what I was talking about. I mean, 7 drops are huge, I'm going to be honest. Yeah.
Oh. One's a brute. Still bruting.
They're so big still. That's amazing. So that is a Priestess of Fury, which is 6 damage to enemies, right, including face. So it can go face for extra face damage. There is 2 damage to the Barongeddon to all other characters, including face. So that is 2 extra damage from the Barongeddon.
Lothar trades in.
This hasn't gone well. This has not gone well.
I see.
You can also get the trade with Lothar, right, as well.
But the trade only works, it only goes off on the scripted one, like the one that happens at the end of the turn, I think, right? Just trading with it doesn't actually help.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I more meant he can leave the Blade Master up, right?
I see, yes.
Sorry, I wasn't very specific at all there. Just having half the conversation in my own head. But yeah, it just means like the Blade Master's like, if we even want to say anything here, like the problem, but...
The thing is that, again, I'm not 100% sure in which order this sequencing will go off. I'm going to presume because Priestess is on the left that it will go first, so the Blade Master could tank the Priestess damage.
Oh, fair, yeah.
Before the Lothar then takes care of it, so maybe trading there is actually kind of smart. Again, that's more, same reason killing the 2-2, right? Like, the Geddon's going to kill it anyway, so why are you killing the 2-2? But I think it's just to guarantee the Priestess damage to go to the face at the end. Everyone looks very confused because you need a lot of very intricate knowledge of sequencing to make sure you're getting that turn exactly right. I'm not sure Felkeine did, but that was a phenomenally confusing Hearthstone turn to play.
Yeah, and even though it looks like, oh, miss lethal, because if he dealt 7 damage to face with Lothar or whatever, then fine, but obviously, as you said, part of that lethal is the blades going to face.
Yes. And whether or not Lothar goes before, because like could it be the play order, like which order you played the original brutes in?
Maybe
to those minions? I don't think so. But I would not be 100% confident what the sequencing of end of turn effects would be there, because there was so many of them going off.
Also, that's huge that Bunnyhoppor didn't play the Slogger into anything this turn, right? Because we can see the Stranglethorn Tiger from the web spinner. Okay, he's going to play it this turn. Okay, he's going to preemptively play it. I didn't know whether he was going to hold it. That's why I was a little bit scared.
Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, you just probably wouldn't even quest, right? You just play Stranglethorn.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's just Tiger 1 damage, go, yeah. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah. It would have been pretty funny, for sure. Alright, I mean, Feral Spirits is the answer you're looking for. It's what makes it as difficult as possible for your opponent to achieve lethal, but I talked about the dynamic before, with the Librarians being shuffled into the deck, retaining their discount, coming back out again, eventually costing 0. But he is going to need both of them, as long as the 7/7 is dealt with on the other side as well.
And this is one of the drawbacks of the way this Brute Demon Hunter works, right? If you don't get them, then you don't really have great removal, you don't really have great like other options. The deck becomes extremely narrow.
Ooh.
Spicy.
Very spicy indeed. 7/7's just out here living, apparently. Now just the matter of a single Librarian and 12 damage going face for Felkeine this turn. And you can see, yeah, he's getting ready. He knows this turn is going to have to be good, it's going to have to be quick, and it's going to have to be clean. Actually, with the additional taunt, okay, he's going to Lightning Bolt face. This way he gets the additional taunt, so now he does still need 2 Librarians and the trade. I think, interestingly, with the 3rd taunt coming out, though, if he were to... Okay.
Positioning.
It's too much mana, though. It's too much mana, is it not? I feel like it's too much. Yeah, he's just going to go with Chaos Leech instead. This is nice because it buys him the turn he needs, right? Now he can just spend this turn clearing this up, and he's chilling. Yeah, I really like this option.
Stranglethorn Tiger! Go!
Dumb.
Oh, Note Taker Bloom. You can get out Prakan this turn, but
Doesn't
to what
matter, though,
end?
does it?
Yeah, to what end?
Can't answer the board, so that means that his taunts are dead. I mean, taunt totem?
He also doesn't have lethal, right? Like, it's only 7. 9 with the weapon.
No, but he has Kurtrus, he has Alliance Frenzy in his deck. Like, the idea is that you are going to take 12.
Sure, I guess.
Of the time. Like, the minions are trading into the taunts, is what I'm mostly considering here. And then the Alliance Frenzy will be able to go face, especially since it's not already in the hand and will end up being very cheap when it's drawn.
True. I guess more from Bunny's side, there's no point in him not doing this turn, right? Like, he does the turn and just hopes something crazy happens.
Yeah.
How do you think he makes the trades into Kurt?
No, that's just worse, right? Because then you're only asking your opponent to do 7, whereas right now you need both of these minions to drop. Really?
Well,
Really?
is there any way you could gain 1 additional weapon damage without Lion's Frenzy? Would that matter? Probably.
Jeez. I mean, insta soul fragments, dude. Okay. Spending 4 on a glide is always a risky way to start the turn.
As well.
Finding librarians, which is not ideal.
Got glide 2 though, and Lion's Frenzy will be playable, right?
Lion's Frenzy will be playable, yes. Lion's Frenzy will cost 1 at any point that it's drawn, but Felkeine shaking his head, not particularly happy, it's looking like. Crimson Sigil Runner on the left is beautiful, though. He'll take those. He doesn't get it this turn.
Acrobatic?
He's in serious danger of just running out of cards
We
in
got
the
it.
deck. Where is it? We're so far behind. I'm assuming it's there. Okay,
Yeah,
there it is, off the acrobatics.
Wow.
That is going to be infinite damage, and it's going to be the series for Felkeine. And you can see the roller coaster of emotions that he went through. I'm not going to call it the cleanest series that I've ever seen, but also, like, I kind of have this standard for myself where I don't want to criticize players too heavily unless I can tell you what the play was,
Right.
What they didn't do. I can't tell you what the play was on that turn, unless there was like an obvious lethal that we're missing. But again, I think the sequencing issues is what's coming into that. But if there's something very obvious that we're missing, apologies. But I don't think it can be described as a clean performance overall from Felkeine. But at the end of the day, scoreboard, and that's what he needed, right? Is to put up a big performance because he is facing relegation at this point. Make no mistake about it, and he's making a habit out of doing that. It seems so far in Grandmasters, and it's a fortune that he will want to reverse as soon as possible, I would imagine.
Yeah, and this is what he had to do to continue to try and gain as many points as possible. He took down Bunnyhoppor now in this series. Fantastic result for Felkeine. He moves on to tomorrow and then maybe even makes it all the way to the finals or even wins the whole week. And that will turn his fortunes round, right? Even, say, going into this week on 1 point, 2 point, gaining 5 suddenly makes you so much safer going forward as long as you can just get some semblance of consistency, even if it's just making it to stream every week. You feel much better with that 5 point sort of recovery boost there for Felkeine. So we'll see how he gets on for the rest of the weekend. It was a huge win for him and a much needed one. And Bunnyhoppor, probably not really happy with the outcome of that series, of course, overall, but still, Bunnyhopper's been doing well enough this series, this season, that he isn't in any kind of hot water due to this loss, right? It's a top 8 for the week, not too shabby at all.
Yeah, nice to see kind of a grindier back and forth series as well, with both players also kind of taking their time, like a classic old school Europe series, but with less control priest, which makes it infinitely better. It was a pretty good one overall, I think. Bunny visibly disappointed at the end, I think, frustrated not only by the loss, but the manner of the loss, just based on his